Can you hear me? I think that's working. Lovely. It's fantastic to see so many people here tonight. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for coming candidates too. I'm Helena Whittam. I'm a local environmentalist, and I decided to organise this event because there is a climate emergency, and the climate really should be on the lips of all our politicians. It shouldn't just be an issue in this election, it should be the issue of this election. Okay. My first time with a microphone. I couldn't have done this without a fantastic group of volunteers who stood up to help me, so thank you so much for them. Thank you to Sustainable Tiverton, Extinction Rebellion Seaton and Axe Valley, and Extinction Rebellion Tiverton. You've been fantastic, thanks. We've had absolutely loads of questions. Thank you so much for submitting them. I'm afraid we won't be able to get through all of them, but we're going to whiz through as many as we can. And my apologies to those of you who don't get their questions asked. I wish we could get through all of them. This is a free event, but at the end we'll be asking for donations if you can possibly afford to do so, just to cover our costs for putting on this event. And any excess that we raise, we'll donate back to this school for thanks for letting us use their brilliant hall tonight. Thank you, Honiton. Last couple of things. There's a big fire exit at the back, should we need it, and also the exit through the front, where you came in. I think that's about it. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand you over to our chair, who's Tracy West. She's the CEO of a tree planting charity called the Word Forest Organisation. So thank you, Tracy.
Now, I'm not sure, but I believe I'm on this microphone. Is that correct? Yeah. Do excuse me. Okay. Falls upon my shoulders to be chair. I will be firm. I too have got a couple of things to say before we press on through the evening. Thanks to Helena for starting everything off. I really am honoured to be here. I too am an environmentalist. I'm an author and broadcaster on sustainable living and CEO of the reforestation charity. So matters green matter very much to me. Before we press into the guts of the evening, and I really cannot wait, I actually have to introduce a lady who I think, the lights are very bright here, but I think there's a lady to my right, Caroline Kolek, who is the Honiton Town Councillor from St Paul's Ward, who played an integral part in getting the council to declare a climate emergency. May I welcome you up to the stage? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming to this event this evening. I've been asked to say a few words, so I'll keep them really brief because there's lots of important questions that we've got to ask. Honiton Town Council passed a motion in August to take all steps possible to make Honiton carbon net neutral by 2030. And as you are probably all aware, that there are numerous councils around Devon that have done the same. Indeed, numerous councils around the country that have done the same. Our district council has passed the climate emergency for 2040. Devon County Council are 2050, as is our national government. Personally, I don't think we've got time to wait to 2050. I don't think we've got time to wait to 2040. And I'm actually quite concerned because from the evidence we're seeing, I'm not sure we've got time for 2030. But it's not just the climate. There's single-use plastics. As much as I do everything I can to keep my plastic consumption down, every time I go shopping, I come home and I think I'm drowning in plastic. There's the lack of or the loss of biodiversity. There's the loss of natural habitat. There are growing concerns about animal welfare. So there are lots and lots of important things that we need to question this evening. And as much as we take our own personal steps around buying products that are sort of, with animal welfare in mind, reducing our carbon footprint, reducing plastic use. We can't do that without a government that is from top down bringing in policies and legislation to make sure we are, as the human race, we are cleaning up our act. Because let's be honest, we've left this planet in pretty much a mess. Yeah. So please ask our candidates questions about what their party, if they got elected to lead our government, what they are going to do in order to reduce carbon, in order to reverse the loss of biodiversity, what they're going to do about afforestation, what are they going to do about the single-use plastics. So I'm sure you've got lots of fantastic questions. Thank you very much.
I think we need to press on through the evening. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to, there are some important people here in the room who are going to be important to you folks here on the front. They're going to be keeping you in order with your times. If you could just show me your... Okay. So we have 2 minutes for discussion. That's showing you've got 2 minutes to do it. And the stop is stop. And she will get quite forceful with that stop sign, which is handy. If you do not answer the questions, I shall endeavour to ask you to answer the question. And I think it's now time for... I know you were told you'd have a 5-minute introduction. I'm afraid because we have got so many questions to get through, it's going to be 3 minutes to stand and introduce yourself. So if I just give you a general rundown of everybody. Conservatives, we have Mr. Neil Parish for the Greens. We have Colin Reid for Labour, Elizabeth Pole for the Liberal Democrats, John Timperley, and for UKIP, Margaret Dennis. So if I could start at this end of the room, you have, I think, this mic to work with. Unless you've got a secret one on the table there. Please hold it nice and close. You are first, simply because that's just the way the cookie crumbled. Hold it nice and close to your mouths, please. And if you cannot hear at the back, please let us know urgently and we will address it. Thank you very much. If you could introduce yourselves, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks very much. So, yeah, I'm Liz Pole and I'm a business owner, live near Axminster. I'd like to thank all the candidates from all the parties for turning up at this climate debate this evening, unlike the Prime Minister, who has no-showed for the live television debates. I want to say this, have no doubt, this is a climate emergency and we have to act now. We've heard from Professor Tim Lenton at the University of Exeter only yesterday, telling us in the Journal for Nature that we may have actually passed the tipping point in several points in several sectors. That's why everyone has to get behind a transformative green plan that Labour has. Be in no doubt this could be the last chance at this election for us to act. Let me be clear that Boris Johnson's led Tory government is not going to be acting decisively for the climate. You only have to look at Neil Parish, our MP's record in government. He's voted against climate action over a dozen times. In the 2017 election, Labour had 15,670 votes in Tiverton and Honiton and is the opposition here in the constituency. We cannot have any inaction. Please tell all your friends and family. The good news is that even for climate deniers, Labour's plans are going to be transformative for Britain. So our investments are going to be region-specific. They're going to create green new jobs. They're going to create new businesses in new sectors that are going to be environmental sectors. And we're going to be investing in things like solar, tidal, electric, batteries. So we need these projects to be community-led rather than developer-led in terms of the housing. All new housing is going to be carbon neutral by 2020. And we're going to be also retrofitting to the highest energy standards for all of the rest of the housing stock in the UK. And all of this is going to be backed by a national education scheme, which is going to be skilling workers to be able to tackle the climate emergency through 1 million new green jobs. So I just wanted to say that it's an absolute priority that voters ensure that our planet is going to be kept available for our children and our grandchildren to live in, and also for all of the nature in the world.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Neil Parish, and I've had the honour of being your Member of Parliament for the last 9.5 years, and one of the jobs that I've had in Parliament since 2015 is that I chair the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. And I've led inquiries into plastics and reducing plastics, also looking at how we deal with compostable plastics. We don't want to mix the two because they will not then be recycled. The way we can actually, create more water fountains and use less bottled water, and all sorts of practical things to look at the way, do we need to wrap all vegetables? Some do. You don't want to push up, by getting rid of all plastic, you mustn't push up food waste, because vacuum packing and the like does help to keep food longer, but we've got to be practical now to reduce plastics generally. Also led a joint inquiry into air quality, which was with the both the Health Committee, Transport Committee, Local Government Committee, and the EFRA Committee, because it's called the EFRA Committee, not the DEFRA Committee. And we looked at the way we can actually look at the hot spots across the country where particular air quality is the problem, especially with electric cars, electric buses, electric taxis. Looking at the way that we can actually, lorries are a big problem because it's very difficult to produce an electric lorry, but hydrogen and others can be done when we order online. Do we actually need so many vans going around delivering, all sorts of practical things like that. We're also doing an inquiry on flooding, on coastal erosion, where the coast of Norfolk is coming back at probably about 50 feet a year. It is not only fascinating, but it's also terrifying to make sure that how far do we retreat, what do we do to actually stop it actually happening. We've also done pre-legislative scrutiny on the 25-year environment plan, and also, of course, very much on the Office of Environmental Protection, which we will very much need to hold government to account. Because one of the jobs the Select Committee do, I've got a cross-party committee, and so very much looks across party, and also holds government to account. And we're actually elected by all members of Parliament, not just Conservatives, all members. Each Select Committee has is nominated by Labour or Conservative Scottish Nationalists, but then it's the whole party, whole of Parliament that vote. Then, as far as we've got the ban on plastic exports to non-OECD countries, £4 billion pledged in the manifesto for flood defences. The rebate for South West Water is guaranteed £50 because of the coastal amount of coastals we have to protect. We have 3% of the population and 30% of the beaches in the southwest. We've also £3 billion to improve efficient public buildings, schools and hospitals. Net zero carbon, we are heading by 2050, put into law this year. The first major economy to do so. UK is to host a UN climate change conference this year. UK is a world leader because we...
If you could just draw it to her, thank you.
Right, we just have to make sure that as we go forward, not only do we lead the way, but we ask the rest of the world to do the same. Thank you very much.
Passing it along, please, swiftly to John. Thank you.
My name is John Timpley. I'm an orthopaedic surgeon. I'm new to politics. I went in 2015 because I was extremely concerned about the way the NHS was going, that it may not survive. I've been more concerned by other things since. One of them is the climate emergency and, of course, the utter catastrophe of Brexit. And there's one thing very, very clear, that if there is a Tory majority at this next election, then climate change will go onto the back agenda because we will have another year of negotiating the trade agreement and at the end of that, a cliff edge. So we can forget a climate emergency in the next year if we are unfortunate enough to have a majority Conservative administration. So climate change is that. It's absolutely an emergency and we need to take it extremely seriously. But it's also an opportunity. because it allows us to change the values that we have in our life. If we look at the way the economy is presently measured, it's measured in GDP. And we all know from New Zealand that that's not necessarily what we want to measure our life's existence by. That measures drug dealing and arms sales, as well as everything else. And some sort of wellness index of how we live our lives. And we're going to have to change the way we live our lives because of the amount of carbon we're putting into the atmosphere. And we need to change the very way that capitalism works. We have discovered over the last 40 years that unfettered neoliberalism has not worked and will not work in unfettered, because the profit motive will always be there. So we need to change that and go into a green economy, a circle economy, and we need to get green investment. We need to invest, and we're in a place to do it. We have world-class universities. We have people from all over the world wanting to come and study in them and lecturing them if they're allowed to, which they won't be if Brexit happens necessarily. We know that we have to invest in transport. We have to look at new technologies of carbon capture. We have to invest in things that do not release carbon into the atmosphere. So hydrogen cell, we need to reinvigorate the things that the Tories cancelled. We need to get the tidal lagoon going again. We need to get more offshore wind turbines going again. We need to develop solar power. And we need, which is what the Liberals stand for, devolve power to the communities to help them to do that. Because unlike the other two parties, we are not a centralist dictator down from the centre party. We devolve to communities. So there will be leading in terms of green investment banks, and there will be banking for green investment at local level as well. And if you look at some of our policies, they are to put £12 billion in 5 years into renewable energy, and to first of all ban fracking. Let's not mess around. We need to keep carbon in the ground. If we take it out of the ground, it gets burnt, and that will lead to greenhouse gases. So we need to end fuel poverty. This is a marvellous way of improving our society. There are 2.5 million households in fuel poverty in this country. That's a disgrace in the 5th largest economy in the world. And we're going to spend £6 billion on home insulation. Hopefully we'll be able to go through the other things that we intend to do in our exciting manifesto.
Marvellous. Thank you. I'm sure you'll have time to... I'm sure everyone will have time to dot the I's and cross the T's as we go through the evening. Passing along to Colin. Colin Reid, thank you.
Hello, my name's Colin Reid. I figure there's not really a lot of point in telling you much about me, because that part isn't really relevant. The party, the policy, etc. That's the relevant part. Suffice to say that the very first thing I should have said a moment ago was thank you to all of you for coming. Like all of you, and I hope you're not offended by this, I'm just an ordinary person. I just decided that something needed to be done about a lot of things. Mainly things that are the responsibility of the present government. Also, a lot of things that are the responsibility of each and every one of us here. I see myself first as a dad, as before anything else. That's me. I've worked in business, I've worked in management, I've earned plenty of money at times, I've been absolutely broken homeless at times. But above all, my role as a dad has always come first, and this is what worries me. Like has already been said, and you will find a lot of agreement among at least 3, maybe 4 of the parties here on climate, that we just can't ignore this problem. It's been ignored for too long. The UK being one of the first uptaking nations to adopt industry, and being one of the wealthiest nations, has actually contributed, and a lot of people argue this point, but as a proven fact, we've actually contributed far more pollution than most other countries. And for one of the smallest nations, that's despicable. So tonight I just want to sort of dispel a few myths, debunk a few lies. My experience with law will help me to do that, because I actually know how Europe works and how the relationship between UK and Europe works. We've all been subject to a whole load of misleading information, lies, deceit, etc. It's all a deflection. Let's get climate at the heart of everything. Let's deal with Brexit in a totally different way than than some might like, by putting it back to the people, because a lot of minds have changed both ways in the last 3 years, and that's got to be ironed out, because remaining in Europe is going to be key to successfully tackling climate. Thank you. Thanks. In order to do that, we need to reform the whole system. We need proportional voting methods. We need to take a much more mature look at the drug situation, as has already been mentioned. Interestingly, if somebody could remind me, because I have memory issues, to actually come on to that later on, that would be really, really helpful.
We will indeed. Thank you very much. May I draw you to an end? We've had the lady with the stop sign, and she scares me already.
Is it at the 3 already?
We have a new one. We have a minute one as well. We have a 1 minute warning too, which is useful. The tag team on the times will work together as a team. If we could draw that to a close, that's marvellous. And if I could pass down to our final candidate for the evening. Thank you very much to Margaret Dennis. Thank you very much.
Margaret Dennis, I'm standing for UKIP. I am the chairman of Tiverton and Honiton UKIP constituency branch. I'm very new to all of this, but I'm not new to needing or knowing what needs to change. I actually was brought up in the village in Somerset, and we always made do and mend. After meeting the transition group last evening in Dunkeswell, they hold those values now, at long last. I've been vilified for it. Well, why don't you buy new? Well, no, I like mending and I like making things. I used to make my own clothes and my children's clothes. I don't have time for that at the moment, but I will get back to it. Knitting, craft work, these things that help the planet. You can utilise some of the waste that we do have from packaging and what have you in craft, collages that make really good art. And I understand the schools are using this. Let's teach the children how to reuse, how to recycle. As a UKIP member, I still believe in make, do and mend, but climate is forever changing. It changes over millennia. We have to just make sure that we stop the pollution of the planet. It's the filth that we are putting into our watercourses. Road runoff is a disgusting thing that I have seen oiling everything in fields and ponds, no life left. When something wants to hatch, it can't if it's oiled. So road runoff really needs to be tackled by highways and perhaps Natural England. With UKIP, what we want to do is build 1 million homes, and we want to build them on brownfield sites. We also want to use modular building materials made in Britain. They're currently being done at the moment. This has been done before. When people needed housing in the past, it was concrete, basically, in those days, but today it's much more, it's wood, it's insulated so that they're lovely warm homes, and they can be built, because they're modular, to size, to fit the family. This is our new manifesto, which you might not have heard of that one before, but there are enough brownfield sites in the UK to build 1 million homes. For agriculture, we really do need to be. You're absolutely right. I had a stop.
We really need, you do. You followed the stop sign, and that was quite marvellous. Thank you. First of all, thank you. Please give a round of applause to everybody that's brave enough to sit before you. There was one question that I didn't check with Helena before we started, and that was a hashtag for the evening. Has there been one organised? Fine. Shall we have one? How about hashtag, because we'd love you to tweet your thoughts and responses from the candidates today. What about hashtag Honiton hustings? Everyone good with that? Yeah. Hashtag Honiton hustings. Please put your tweets out there for the wider world, because not everybody can be here this evening, and I'm sure that that will help to deliver the messages. I have a stack of questions here, I really do, and I have some that I believe people want to actually ask themselves. So I don't know how we're going to do this. We might just want to, are we going to take this mic, or is there a roving mic to get to people? Perhaps we could turn the, right, okay. So if I could say who the first person is, and then we'll line up the next person so that they're ready, so you'll know where to go beyond that. So the first question is actually, and I'm going to pass the question along to you folks, so you've got it in front of you, in case you forget. It's D. Selby, first of all. That's the first question, is going to be from D. Selby. And the second question is going to come from Angela Wills. So if you could identify where you are, Angela, just so that the roving, wonderful, mic's gone from one end to the other. Okay, could you take it to D. Selby from Weston in Sidmouth? And the question is going to be asked. And if you could pass that to the end, I would be grateful.
Thank you.
We're going to start with Margaret.
Naomi Klein has written in her 2014 book, This Changes Everything, that, and I'm quoting, an urgent choice stands before us between accepting levels of climate disruption that will pretty much change everything about our world, or alternatively, changing pretty much everything about our economy to avoid that fate. Do you agree with Naomi Klein? And if so, what are the implications for you as a politician? Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll start with Margaret at the end. Thank you very much. Yes, if you can just, thank you very much. If you could, thank you very much.
Well, this is going to be a cross-party issue. This is really for everyone. It's not just a parliament that needs to be doing things, it's every one of us. It's, in some ways, I do believe that we need to change capitalism because it's currently hyper, and we may need to pull back on that. Capitalism does help with entrepreneurs, innovation. If you left school with no aspirations because you weren't going to be allowed to earn anything, that is not a good thing. How does that help? So cross-party, I say, the whole of a government should be working together on this with the help of the people. Does that answer your question, Mr. Selby?
Partly, I think there are greater depths to be plumbed.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
I realise the issues that we've got here is we are going to have, we're going to certainly have 5 answers in fairly quick succession. I did omit to say that we are going to keep the answers to 2 minutes in the first instance. Yes. I do apologise for that. I'm sorry. So if we could move along to Colin for your response, please.
Okay, I'll try not to run over this time. I see a lot of faces in the audience who are much more knowledgeable on climate than I am. I wouldn't claim to have all the answers or even half of them. To be honest as well, reading and fentanyl equals sleep, if anyone knows how opioids work to manage pain. So a 96-page manifesto takes an awful lot of doing for someone like me. So if at any time I get anything wrong, can the members of the Green Party actually correct me on it? Because I defer to your better knowledge. Essentially, to answer your question, sir, we have to look at it as a wholesale issue. That's the word I'm struggling for. It can't be tackled with one thing or two things. It can't be tackled by just using less bottles or less plastics. That has to be part of it. But it has to be part of, as we've always said, a Green New Deal. And as the founders of that Green New Deal, the owners of the original one, the Green Party are really the experts on how to do that. Now, I know there are some parties who don't like experts, and the others are in, we have consensus on things. We have children taken to the streets to tell us how to do things. I applaud that. It shouldn't have to happen, But there we go. But these are the things that are having to happen in order to wake people up, to make them change their ways of doing things. In order to bring that about, carbon taxing applied as an incentive, a reward, as in a reduction would be the reward, and also as an enforcement measure against corporations that just refuse to comply. The denial aspect of society does so much damage just because it's more convenient for them to do it. So by addressing things like housing, construction, so many, oh, here we go, words that go out of my head, there we go. By addressing those areas, by addressing the democracy system itself, and changing that around and getting civil assemblies in place to make the decisions locally, then we can really fix it.
I'm so sorry. Really, I am going to keep you to time. I'm going to be a bitch of a chair, I really am. Can you pass that across to Neil, please? There are so many questions we really want the answers to. To Neil, thank you very much. Thank you for your answer. Yes.
Right. Okay, yes. I mean, I think it's one of these things where we have to lead by example. But I think it is one of those things where if we're going to do really great things about global warming and what's happening across the world, it is the international agreements that matter. And so we can reduce the amount of carbon we have here. All of our coal power stations have now been taken out of action, and we have the most wind turbine, offshore wind turbines in the world. So we have actually, you know, though people don't want to accept it, we've got more solar than we've ever had. So we are actually moving in the right direction. In the summer we had 2 days when we actually used nothing but renewable energy. And so, like I said, much more to do. But I think, you know, it's what we have to be careful of is I think also making sure that we take our population with us, and they're very keen to actually have and do what is necessary for the climate. It's no good actually just lecturing people that we've got it all wrong. Let's actually put the carrots out there as well as the sticks and actually encourage people to use less resource, because we do all need to use less resource. Do we need to fly as much? Do we need to do as many journeys? But let's actually sort of make that part of life and the way we look at it. If we're going to, we've got very used to buying online. It sounds great, but of course you've got many more vans delivering it. So I think we've got to look at the whole thing in concept, and then actually make sure that we do sign up to the international agreements, but make sure that China, America and all these others. China very often have been putting out coal-fired power station at one stage, and every 13 days a new power station came on. Now they are beginning to change their policy because of the pollution in Beijing. And so I think let's take the whole world with us as we go forward. Thank you.
Much appreciated to everyone at the front here for paying more attention to our lovely lady with the signs. So we need those. Liz, please.
I did stop when the
you
stop
did
sign.
very well. That was marvellous.
All right.
To Liz, thank you.
Who would you like now?
To Liz, thank you.
Thanks very much. So, well, I do agree with Naomi Klein's statement on the one hand. Yes, we do have to change everything, yes, we do have to change the way that we are living as a society, as a global society. But on the other hand, we don't have to change everything that we do. So micro actions have their part, and yes, everybody needs to reduce their single-use plastics, their carbon inefficient activities, but the problem can't be addressed through individual actions and the market. This is not something for individuals to do. This is something for governments and communities and world leaders to take action on. Equally, we can't expect people to return to sort of 17th century living standards. We have to have a solution that allows us to be prosperous and to take advantage of the things that, the greater way of life that we have in the modern world. And so what we need is a transformative approach to government. We need a fund for investing in our infrastructure for energy and transport and housing, which are the big polluters. Those are the things that are going to tip us over the edge. And so Labour's plan is to invest in 37 offshore wind farms, to create housing that is built as zero carbon footprint, and to retrofit our housing stock, to invest in green energy, green transport, so we can have a plan for electric vehicle production, freight on trains, and yes, that's the way forward.
Marvellous. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. If you could pass it down to John. Thank you very much for your response, John.
Yes, well, as I intimated earlier, I think we have to change our core values of what we want from life, and we need to put green at the very centre of the way we live them. And that is making the way change that capitalism works, and it's leading from the top and from the middle and from the bottom. There should be green at the heart of everything. So if you look in this manifesto, there are lots of things that are exciting. We need to regulate the financial services to make green investment attractive and actually make all the companies on the FTSE sign up for the Paris Agreement and tell government how they're going to achieve it. We need to create a department for climate change and natural resources. We'll know from this last government closed the Department of Energy and Climate Change, and it took 3 further years for climate change to be debated, which was by Leila Moran as a backbench debate in 2019. That is how seriously the Conservative Party took it. We are going to put a cabinet-level Secretary for Sustainability into the cabinet to coordinate activities at all levels of government. And at all levels of government will have to report their green activity. It's going to be potentially disruptive for citizens, so we need citizens' climate assemblies to make suggestions of how we're going to go forward, and there will be a just transition fund. Some of our livelihoods are going to be affected by this. There will be a just transition fund to pay money to those societies and communities that are most affected by climate change. We need an Office of Environmental Protection, and we need to get the Green Investment Bank back. It was privatised by the Conservative government. Let's put it back into public ownership and end fossil subsidies by 2025. As I mentioned earlier, carbon has to be stayed in the ground. It has to be made too expensive to get out and eventually illegal to get out.
Marvellous, that's a jolly good start. Can I just check sound chaps at the back? Is there an issue at the front here with the mic, or are we good? It was a bit crunchy at that last bit. Is there anything there? You're okay, okay. Angela Wills, just at the front here. Could you ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you. Angela Wills, Extinction Rebellion, Seaton. Do you support the use of citizens' assemblies to make binding decisions on how best to deal with the climate emergency that faces us?
Can we start with Neil, please? Thank you.
I've got mixed views over citizens' assemblies. I think they can play a very useful role, provided we can actually get it properly, the information properly collated. Don't forget, I spend quite a lot of time in a select committee process where we actually take evidence from all sorts of witnesses and compile it. So I think they will work if we can make sure we've got the system of actually having proper advice brought and proper ways of actually feeding that back into government. Because it doesn't matter which government it is, it's the process of getting that in place that will make the difference. And it's making sure that we also, there has to be as we debate climate change, we've got to make sure there's also a balance in how we do this. And so that's, I think, when we put citizens' assemblies together, let's make sure that, we said, we have a balanced opinion, and make sure we also take, it's not only cross-party, but it's across society that we need to bring this together, because, like I said, naturally we are all concerned about the climate. You all here are very concerned about the climate, but like I said, it's making sure that we take everybody with us, and that's what I really am very keen to do. So, like I said, we decided I actually wanted to have the Select Committee to do a Citizens' Assembly. I was actually outvoted by my own committee because I have a no majority on it. But like I said, we will look at that again when we go back to Parliament. But I want to be absolutely sure how these things work.
Thank you very much, Neil. Could you pass it along to Liz, please?
Liz.
Yeah. Thank you. And the question too, just so you've got everything to hand.
Okay, thanks very much, yeah. So to paraphrase E.F. Schumacher, small is beautiful, and Labour believe that no one is too small to make a difference. So we will encourage in participatory decision-making, establishing local citizens' assemblies across the country to debate and bring about transformative change. In areas such as carbon emissions associated with lifestyle choices to do with diet, travel, and our throwaway culture. So yes, planned interventions must be transformational, bringing about the structural changes needed to stop continued environmental degradation and climate change. So yes, consultations, partnerships, and working together in consultation with scientists and experts to make sure that that we achieve our goal to be carbon neutral on the pathway to 2030.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. John Timperley, please.
Well, as I mentioned, we have them in our manifesto, the Citizens' Assembly. Whether they should actually mandate what happens, I think what we need is a cross-party, not only cross-party, but we need all the stakeholders to make decisions, and it should be driven by science and by suggestions, and we're really to drive it forward. But Citizens' Assembly are an absolute key part of that. But I bring you again to the danger of not having a government that will take this seriously. And I'm deeply fearful of a majority Tory government. They will not, and we will leave Europe, and we should be at the heart of Europe driving this agenda, because as a big bloc we can drive it. And I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the last government's record on climate change. They banned onshore wind farms, scrapped zero carbon homes, closed the Department of Energy and Climate Change, privatised the Green Investment Bank.
Answer the question.
Ended the Green Deal. I've answered the questions. Of course we have Citizens' Assembly. I have 2 minutes, sir. The environmental has not passed through. They were taken to court 3 times for failing to meet EU air pollution minimum standards. They cancelled rail electrification. This is not a government that we can put in power and go over the next year and expect to do anything with climate change.
Thank you. Heading down to Margaret, and I would just like to add that heckling will be tricky to deal with only because there are so many retorts to back and forward. However, if the audience does feel a question is not being answered, I'm very happy to have a answer the question. That was a superb direct. Thank you very much from the audience. Going on to Margaret, please. Thank you.
We do not have a policy on citizens' assemblies, I'm afraid, in UKIP currently. What we do feel is that how will they be formatted? Who will be on them? Lib Dem, John just said, stakeholders. Now, we've seen this before, haven't we, with local enterprise partnerships. They're not elected, and they are unelected and making their own wages, setting their own amounts of money to be spent. Yes,
please.
And
yes.
It should, yes. And
yes,
citizens' assemblies should be taken from every part of society. We should be using charities who are involved, and the universities too, who actually have a lot of information and will do a lot of inquiring into things that are needed to be done. We want you to be involved. It shouldn't just be people who are supposed to be experts, because how they might do something that's damaging to everybody's lives. We have the LEP who, under the Greater Exeter Spatial Plan, are going to make every village a suburb. And that's the way that it's set up as stakeholders, just to let you know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. And finally, oh, by the way, just a small reminder, hashtag Honiton hustings for your thoughts and views as the evening rolls out. Please use your phones as you choose. Colin, please, for your final comment on this question. Thank you.
Sure. I've got a habit of running over, haven't I? So to avoid that, the first thing I'm going to say is yes, absolutely, we support it. Myself and as a party, the Greens do support participation in all forms, not just in civil assemblies, but also in the budget forming too, so you can actually have your say and your words and your opinions can all actually directly affect government and legislation, etc. For too long under the two-party system, people have not been listened to, and that has never been made more clear than with the Brexit issue. Two sides not being listened to. I'm not even going to explore that right now, because this is about climate. But as an example, it will do. We would actually scrap the vanity projects that go on. There's plenty of those, assure me. But we would change the whole way of running our country. It's very much at the moment, it's a very patronising style. Oh, we'd like you to come with us. We'd like you to get involved too. I'm sorry, but you appoint politicians to represent your views and your opinions. So really, it should be you saying to us, we'd like you to come with us on what we want to do. Yeah? Anyone in a minute? No? No? Good. To be honest, does that answer your question? Because I don't really want to ramble on and just go on anything that's irrelevant.
Well, as you're the last person to speak, I can say that most of you, I think, have understood citizens' assemblies, but they are quite specifically groups of people that are appointed, rather like a jury would be appointed. They're not experts, but they are across. They represent the society basically, from their randomness, and then they will ask for experts to advise them, and then yes, am I?
Yeah. If I may, as chair, I think it would be lovely to explore this topic further, and perhaps if we have time at the end, we will do. But certainly, everybody on the front needs to be very clear on what all of these terms are. And if they don't know, I'm sure they will be reading up on it very swiftly. I should have identified the next two questions. They're coming from Yvette Andrew-Warther, who is not here. Beyond that, it's Sally Chapman, who I believe is. So if Sally could just identify herself. So beyond this question, it will be Sally. So thank you to the last two question posers. This one is called, sorry, the lighting's tricky. Telling the truth. Tackling the climate crisis is going to need every one of us to adapt to major changes in almost every aspect of our lives. Parliament may have already declared a climate emergency, although tellingly the government didn't. But this really isn't enough. The truth of what we face is difficult and scary, and the change that is needed is difficult and scary. How do each of the candidates plan to tell the people the truth of what is happening, and what may happen if nothing is done to stop further climate and biodiversity damage? It's a complex question, and I would like to pass it to, if you could go down just one more, to John, please, to begin with this one. Thank you, John.
Good. So the question is, how are we going to tell the people what is difficult and scary and address this? Well, I think we need to look at our democracy, because at the moment we have a democracy that's really not fit for purpose. If you look over the last 40 years, we've had two tribes, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, and in the 1950s, 90% of people voted for them. Since then, we progressively have had a multi-party state, with the one exception of the 2017 election. And what is left to is yaboo politics, which is where policies have gone from left to right, without any consensus and then grown-up thinking. They have, in a way, been coalitions of the left and right, but now those left party and the right party have left the middle ground. The Conservative Party has become the Conservative and Brexit Party, and the Labour Party has gone far left. So we need to change the way that our democracy works. We need proportional representation. We need a different style where we're not actually sitting in opposition, two sword lengths, but actually discuss things. And there is this thing called the tyranny of the majority, which was the same as the election, when 52% of people get their way and 48% don't get any voice at all. What we need is a coalition of people to work out what is best for people and then be honest with those people and not go to the government whip of two tribes. The two-tribe system has gone, and it's about time the BBC, the mainstream media and the two parties realised that.
Thank you. If you could pass it to Liz, please. Thank you. I am trying to jigger it around so everyone gets a fair crack of the whip. Thank you very much, Liz.
Okay, so first of all, the Labour Party has not gone far left. The Labour Party is running on a platform of transformation of our country, of a green transformation of our country, and it is here for all of us and for the planet. So I want to be very clear on that. I'm a business person. I'm a mum in East Devon. I am not a far left extremist. I am totally behind Labour's programme of green transformation for this country. And it's going to sell itself. It's going to be on everywhere because we are going to be bringing that green transformation into every aspect of people's lives, from their housing being made energy efficient, to their jobs being green jobs. We're going to be creating 1 million green jobs. Okay, so people are not going to be in doubt because it's going to be a transformation and it's going to be everywhere. And we're also going to be making sure that these climate emergency themes and green transformational themes are going to be in the curriculum. They're going to be in education, and we're going to be providing education for 2 to 4-year-olds, 30 hours of free education a week for 2 to 4-year-olds, and we're also going to be providing 6 years of adult education so that people can progress in their green careers and retrain for new green careers. And so those education programs are also going to be green education programs that are going to be transforming our country. So yes, Labour is a transformational programme for this country, and do not be put off by it being labelled anything else.
Lovely, thank you very much. Could you Margaret Fleming, and are the moved along as well, because that's very helpful. I'm so sorry with the microphone. I should have had a lapel one, shouldn't I, really? Thank you very much. If you could give your contribution to the question.
Well, let me take you to where it might end up. No central heating, scraping the frost off the inside of a window, running around with no plastic shoes on the beach. This is what I grew up with. We didn't have everything that everybody has today. We didn't need it. I still don't want it. I'm quite happy not to use central heating. It's too hot in here. I'm just saying that, yes, you do need to advise people that they need to actually turn the central heating off when it's warm enough. Put an extra jumper on until it's needed. But yes, it's advice, isn't it? You know, it's common sense, really. Do you not agree? You want to keep your central heating on, do you? Yeah. Well, I think... Sorry? Can you say that again? We're talking about getting rid of plastic use, so I mentioned that as a slightly jokey part. You don't take jokes very well, do you?
I think this isn't the room for jokes, everybody. This is not the platform for jokes, if UKIP, draw that point.
If UKIP did get into Parliament, they wouldn't give you a full-on Project Fear. What they would say is we need to help the planet. We do need to plant orchards again. That's part of the tree planting, I hope. And we need to be looking at plenty of green fields to hold the carbon, etc. We have to, I don't think citizens' assemblies are going to do it, but we do need to. In the Soviet era, they used to have citizens' assemblies, just so that you do know. It is going to be difficult and scary just trying to get the whole of the planet behind you on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Margaret, for that response. If we could, thank you, audience. Hashtag Honiton hustings. To Colin, please. To Colin, please. Thank you, audience, please. I really want to move through so many questions. Let's all work together. Thank you. Colin, thank you.
So I think there are a few more things to fear than plastic shoes and stuff like that. No, it's the point.
Climate change isn't a joke.
Climate change is massive. It's been going on for the beginning, since the beginning. We're in the 6th extinction event. The 3rd one took out 96% of the population of all species on the planet. 96%. Do we want humans being part of the next one? Do we want anything being part of the next one? You know? As far as how would we actually reach people and talk to them and make them aware of these things? Well, the fantastic groups like Extinction Rebellion and the pupil strikes that are going on, they're doing that already, but they're running into brick walls with current government. Greta Thunberg has led the way on this and almost been ridiculed out of Parliament. Honesty has to be, surely, as I was raised, honesty is fundamental to everything. So that it's got to come from government first, central government. It's got to come from district and county councils. It's got to be going to local councils. Because otherwise, how can you and we, as citizens, engage in these civil assemblies in order, if we're being given, let's say, duff information and lies and deceit. It has to be informed discussion. Sorry. Because discussing stuff and going on and on and on and more, doing inquiries but with no action, that doesn't achieve anything. But if we can all be honest with you and we can actually listen to you and get a consensus, then we can actually tackle this problem. Because the way to fix it is a lot smaller than the problem itself. The cross-party consensus that we have now.
Yes, thanks. Really, I think we'll undoubtedly have time to squeeze those other bits in. The stop sign is up, and I'm happy to move along to Neil for your final contribution to this question. Thank you, and thank you, panel, for passing the questions along. If you want to give me the rubbish that clears your desk, please feel free.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And first of all, I've tried to sort of avoid going on and on about Brexit or no Brexit, but I have to take John up on the fact, yes, we have to listen to the 48% of people that voted to stay in the European Union, but I think we also have to actually accept that 52% of people voted to come out. And so I think we really do have to sort of wake up, smell the coffee, and get on with it. And so let's be. The thing I want to say about it is that there are some very positive things for the environment for coming out of the European Union, because one of them, let me finish. One of them is the common agricultural policy, because I don't think any of the panel here would necessarily argue with me that the common agricultural policy has been great for the environment. So developing an agricultural policy that is right and bespoke for this county, for the Blackdown Hills, for holding carbon in the soil, put more permanent pasture, 2.5 times amount of carbon is held in permanent pasture than it is in forests. So we've got to plant trees as well, but we've also got to have grassland, and we can actually, our fishing policy. Norway has a fishing policy which actually is much better environmentally than the European CFP, because they can actually close fishing grounds that are overfished, and they can open up others if it's safe to do so. So, you know, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater all the time. There are some really good things that we can do. Michael Gove, actually, when he was Secretary of State for Environment, Food, did actually a lot of very good work and is recognised by a lot of environmental organisations. And so let's not. And actually, George Eustace, a very good fishing minister, and Richard Benyon before, actually managed to get a lot of discards banned by Europe. So there is a lot, yes, but like I said, there's a lot we can do as we leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, panel, for that interesting set of responses to that question. Thank you, audience. Thank you, audience. If we could move to Sally Chapman, please, thank you very much, to ask this question.
Is my microphone on? We have reached a tipping point in human civilization. Experts say we have 18 months to enact the policies we need to stay within the 1.5 degree warming by 2030 stipulated by the UN. Devon County Council declared a climate emergency to be zero carbon by 2050, whilst a number of district councils within Devon County Council, such as Mid Devon and Teignbridge, have more ambitious targets of 2030 and 2025. We have to do what is necessary. There is a lot more that local authorities could do locally to move towards zero carbon economy if there was more funding available from central government. How do you propose to work with our local governments here in Devon to take emergency action in the next 5 years that will prevent climate and ecological disaster? Thank
Marvellous. You. That's a very comprehensive question. Thank you very much. And I just...
One point. Devon County Council is now 2030. So please not keep on about 2050. I'm a county council.
Thank you very much for that point. Thank you very much for that point. Can I just take a tiny quick straw poll from the room? We're going to move all the answers to 1 minute. Can we have a show of hands if you're good with that? Yeah. I'm happy with that. Okay, you've got 1 minute to answer your questions. And if we could start with Liz, please. Thank you very much. 1 minute. And please, panel, keep an eye on the guys here and Adir. Thank you.
Okay, yes, so Labour is committed to restoring local government finance, which is going to allow our local government, county council, district council, town council, parish councils to be able to act on the climate emergency. So that will be driving driving everything from planning to everything, from planning to transport to housing and everything. So yes, we're going to be putting the money back into our local government and working with our local communities to make sure that everything is pushed. Everything that we do is going to be assessed against environmental and climate emergency standards. From literally every public procurement is going to be done along those lines. We're going to be shortening supply chains and so that we reduce our carbon footprint. So yes, everything.
Thank you very much. Moving along to Margaret, please. Thank you.
Thank you. UKIP believes that we've had a missed opportunity because we've been building nuclear plants that are using fission instead of fusion. Fusion is not as dangerous. It doesn't produce weapons. Of course it works.
Can you just ensure that the questions all go along to... Do you have the question clearly there? Okay, thank you.
So...
Thank you.
So you're saying that you want to... I didn't say this in what I've been given previously.
There have been a huge number of questions, over 70. We worked incredibly hard to narrow them down and not repeat questions. So it may have been that that's very similar to another one, and we've tried to get as many diverse. So if you could run with that question there, that would be marvellous.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I agree that we should be working with the local councils down to parish level in particular. And I actually do engage with all the councils. And I think that Parliament should be doing far more on that. And we should be looking at ways of education so that we can work out, if you say that fusion doesn't work, that it does work. Because obviously, thank you. But you see, that is how you can make energy. And it doesn't have to cover the fields in grey fields of solar arrays, which the companies that are putting them in are going out of business before they have to remove it after the 25 years. You do have to be careful here what's happening with your finances. Thank you.
Thank you, audience. Thank you. Are you complete there with your question, Margaret? If you could pass it to Neil, and are we keeping to a 1 minute? Are we keeping to 1 minute without folks here at the front? Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, audience. Thank you.
Right. So Devon County, like I said, have actually signed up very much to carbon neutral by 2030. The District Council here in Mid-Devon and East Devon have also, Mid-Devon in particular, have put the solar panels on all the houses, have done a lot of great deal of good work. So the one thing we found when we looked in the inquiry into the air quality is it is actually working not only with government but with all agencies and local authorities. And so more charging points for electric cars, like I said, changing routes as well to reduce pollution, working together to actually deliver what actually matters as well, not only the carbon, but the quality of air that we breathe, which is so essential. So therefore, working together is absolutely essential, and in that respect, we will carry on doing so. We need to actually get more resource, I accept that, to local authorities, but there has been, we did inherit a huge deficit. We did, yes, I know, you want to rewrite it, but we did 150 billion, and it will not go away, and we have settled that, and now we can move on. Thank you very much.
Hold the stop sign a little higher. Thank you. Thank you very much. John, please. Thank you.
Well, as I was saying earlier, part of the Liberal Democrats' core being is to devolve power down to local level of local democracy. And so we would oblige local authorities to set a zero carbon strategy with new powers and with new funding. And we're setting up green banks and local banks to help do just that. And really, I don't think what we need to do is get into a bidding war about which date. What we need to do is quickly and put it at the core value of everything that we do. So in our manifesto, we're saying that net zero greenhouse emissions by 2045, the latest, but 75% cut by 2030, 93% cut by 2040, that's in line with what the World Wildlife Fund and the Friends of the Earth think is reasonable. So we can bring all those things forward, but we have to put it at the centre of everything we invest in. And as battery technology and hydrogen fuel technology comes forward, then we can actually roll this out and bring those dates forward. The key is that it's at the core of everything we do at every level of democracy, from the top downwards.
Thank you very much. And finally, Colin. Yes, Roman, thank you.
A long question, you only get 1 minute. Wow.
Yep.
Okay, very, very quickly, the very first thing you can do is remove the Conservative government. What we can do once that's been achieved, there'll be more room for things that are in the Green Manifesto, which are compulsory purchase orders, which will be used on land that's being sat on by developers after they've had planning permission, which prevents the building of affordable and local housing and social housing. Also against perhaps the houses that have been built that were supposed to be affordable and then turned out not to be. To just take those back and give them to the homeless and to other people. We've committed to planting 700 million trees, quite a lot, but if you do the maths on it, it can be done. Establish a carbon system, a carbon capture and storage to take all of the pollution, if you like, to go with a quick word, from iron and steel industry, etc., and capture that, chuck it in the ground where it belongs. Housing, look at...
That was a short end. Thank you. And thank you to Sally for that question. Thank you to everybody for these amazing questions. This is a real surefire, quick, straight from the hip. Shouldn't take a minute, really. If I can pass this one to the very end, I will, so we can start with Margaret, please. The question is very straightforward, very short, from David Baxdale, and it's, can each candidate, and if you just move it from the end through to across here to Liz, can each candidate say what sum in their party's budget is allocated to measures for combating climate change? So what sum in their party's budget? Starting with you, Margaret, thank you.
I have no idea. I only got the new manifesto last evening. And there we go. Let me just have a quick look for you.
Well, while you're looking...
Yeah.
I mean...
Environment. Energy and environment. Well, we have different plans for this because we wanted to build modular homes, which will help against the disgusting pollution from building housing.
Please, audience, if you could be quiet, I am going to give each candidate a minute. Thank you.
I'll be absolutely honest. We have not allocated a budget to this. But the thing is, what we have said is by leaving the EU, we'll have the budget to do this.
Thank you very much. If you could pass it along to Colin. Colin, 1 minute on this, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I was actually trying to do the maths. It's all in the manifesto, please add it up. It has been costed, every single bit of it. A lot of it would actually come from what we gain by greenifying the utility industry, there we go, and other industries. But I can't give you an exact figure. I don't know whether you want one for per year or per 5 years or next month, but there's going to be 100 billion invested just in those passive houses I mentioned per year. And we are talking astronomically high numbers of pounds, but I cannot put an exact figure on it. It's the one thing I haven't done is actually add up all the individual separate bits. But it is costed, and it makes sense. That much I have done.
I was looking at the 2020 budget, your 2020 budgets. How much is devoted to measures that combat climate change in your 2020 budgets?
Thank you for the clarity on that. If we could continue along the line.
Yes, well, we'll have to add it all up. I mean, we've said that we will borrow because of the cheap rates of borrowing at the moment, 130 billion pounds to invest in infrastructure. That includes public transport, that is opening new railways, electrifying the railways, having different forms of fueling the railways, broadband, house building, passive house standards by 2025, reducing energy consumption, to put capital funds into schools and hospitals, and the Green Investment Bank. So that's 130 billion. It's reckoned to be the £50 billion Remain bonus, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies have looked at all of the three parties' manifestos. They found that the Conservative one, which is very thin on the ground, doesn't add up, and the Labour one doesn't add up either, but ours they're quite complementary about. If we look at the renewable energy, the £12 billion over 5 years for investment in renewable energy, £6 billion for home insulation, starting with the poorest in society, and £18 billion over 5 years for the Nature Act. That is to have a new Nature Act with 60 million trees, restoration for carbon absorption, and £5 billion for flood protection.
Okay.
So it all adds together at every level of what we do.
That's nice, clear. Thank you very much. On to Neil, thank you.
As I said earlier, 4 billion on flood protection, 6.3 billion on home improvement, 3 billion on energy efficiency in public buildings, signing up naturally to the climate change and CO2 reductions by 40%. So What we've also got in is the money, which I can't give you the exact figure of, is what's also already being paid for green energy out there now, for the energy that we have from biodigesters, all of these things. And of course we have got the most wind power, most offshore wind power in the world, and all of that is also being... No, they did not. No, you helped to do it because you were part of the coalition,
Please,
if I remember rightly, at the time. So, like I said, I think you'll find... I wouldn't like to mislead you on all the exact figures, because, like I said, all of it are all parts of the budget that are actually out there now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And panel, I know it's difficult, but if you could try and hold back. There are lots of people that want to heckle, and you're not allowed either. Finally. Thank you, Liz.
Okay, so one of our first pieces of legislation will be a climate and emergency bill, a climate and environment emergency bill, setting out in law robust binding new standards of decarbonisation, nature recovery, environmental quality and habitats and species protection. And our total transformation fund for the economy is going to be £400 billion. And that is going to be guaranteeing that every penny is spent is going to be compatible with our climate and environmental targets. And of that total, 250 billion will be directly funding renewable and low carbon energy, transport, biodiversity, and environmental restoration. So those figures are going to be over 10 years. I can't actually tell you what the 2020 budget is going to be, but it's going to be, we're going to be acting now, so I assume that a large part of it is going to be in the first term.
Thank you very much, panel. I believe we have Joe Fitzgerald from Beer in the room. If you could identify yourself. I'm sorry, I should have asked where you were before. The next question doesn't require someone in the audience. If you could articulate, thank you.
Okay. Last year, transport accounted for a third of the UK total emissions, greater than any other sector. Aviation greenhouse gas emissions have more than doubled in the last 30 years. Alarmingly, the Department of Transport have no transition plan in place to decarbonise UK economy, but intends to invest in road building and transport expansion. How would your party decarbonise the transport system?
Thank you very much. And that's going to start with Colin, please. Thank you.
Right. Transport. Okay, cars. Well, they're a thing that we have to have at the moment. The idea is to move away from private cars. If you use private cars, it's going to be through like a tenureship rather than an ownership. We would actually implement a complete overhaul of the transport sector so that we've got environmentally friendly buses, trains, etc., all provided at a price that's cheaper than going by car to encourage everybody else to actually use it. I was distracted at the start of this because I was still trying to find you an answer for the last question. Poverty. I'll put it on Twitter later. What we would do is, like we've said, it's a wholesale thing. It can't be tackled piecemeal. You've got to adopt the whole Green New Deal or it will fail.
Thank you, Colin. Perfect timing. Moving along to Neil, please, for your response.
Right. The key to this is actually to be able to have more charging points, actually get more electric cars. A lot of that, the car companies are now moving into electric cars in a big way. So sorry, I don't know that I need to be heckled. Thank you very much.
You're talking it up as if it's a big thing, but yet less than 1% of electric cars. I think
you'll find the figure is about 4%, but like I said, we'll argue that another day. What you've got to remember is that we've got to make sure that we actually do have transport for people, transport throughout the countryside, and so therefore hybrid and electric cars are going to be one of the great solutions. We are not all going to be able to have a lot of the buses we can also electrify. All of these things are very good, but let's be practical about how it's done. Let's make sure that we don't actually stop private ownership of cars, because most people do actually want that. Some of the cities will work much better with sharing cars because of the number of people there. So like I said, let's just be sensible and have more electric cars, more charging points.
Thank you, Neil.
And get it done.
Marvellous. Can you pass it to John, please? Thank you for your response.
We don't need new cars. What we need is a massive investment in public transport. So in our manifesto, you'll find that we promote cycling the most, but then there will be massive investment in rail, electrifying the rail and hydrogen cells, hopefully. There'll be new lines hopefully opened up, those at Beecham closed down. Investment in trams and electric buses that go to and from places that people really want to go, especially in rural communities like this. And the aviation thing is a real important. We would put a tax on those people who use the railways, the aircraft the most. But for summer holidays, people who go once or twice a year, there will not be so much tax. And there'll be no net increase in runways under a Liberal Democrat administration. So there'll be no third runway at Heathrow. The whole model of car ownership, I think, is going to go. We drive the cars, 5% of the time we own them. It's a nonsense. And if you look in California, I think their whole model of ownership has changed in that you will possibly get into the next Tesla that's there and be driven by autonomous driving. And in China, it's the same thing. They're way ahead of us in some of these things. We need to be part of a big bloc like Europe to take things forward.
Thank you very much indeed. On to Liz, please. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so to echo what John said, Labour is going to be investing massively in public transport. We are going to be electrifying the rail system. We're going to be putting freight on the rail tracks. We're going to be massively investing in research and development into electric cars. We're going to be creating a national charging grid. The electric car research is going to be making cars affordable for everyone, and are going to be allowing us to export those cars to the rest of the world as part of our prosperity for the country. We're going to be providing a scrappage scheme, which is going to take 400,000 dirty cars off the road. We're going to stop all aid spending on fossil fuel production overseas, redirecting it towards clean renewable energy for all. End all UK export finance support for fossil fuels projects. We're going to tax the big 100 oil companies. We're going to tax frequent flyers. We're going to change the criteria a company must meet to be listed on the London Stock Exchange. And we're going to be developing the recommendations of our 30 by 30 report to put the UK on track for net zero carbon.
That was good. You were good. You were good. It was a tricky question to answer in a minute. Down to the end. Margaret, just to wrap this question up, and then we'll move along.
Thank you. UKIP supports electric cars and the driverless autonomy of the vehicles that will be coming in time for us to leap into when we need them. Now, what we also need, though, are the charging points for the electric cars. They are not keeping pace. And how would you fund that? Then there are subsidies currently for the research and generation of electric cars, the production of them. We could use some of those funds to get the charging points in at the same time as the cars are available. Then you'll see an increase. Then we should see prices dropping, because demand always helps, doesn't it? We want to stop diesel drivers from being penalised currently, because they were advised by government to buy diesel cars because of how clean they are today. That's just for a short time, obviously.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Marvellous. Right, time to exercise your arms very briefly, audience. I always think that when you have a conference of any kind, it's all very well for speakers to speak out at you, but you need to be able to have your voice heard too. I'd like to ask you to raise your hand if you feel you have had enough clarity from the speakers. Put your hands up if you feel you've had enough clarity in the questions that have been answered so far. Okay. A tiny amount in the clarity. Speak. it's interesting, isn't it? It's different. You need to sharpen up your act, panel, and please give more clarity, more succinct answers, more punchy points if you possibly can. And I realise it's a difficult thing to do. It's very warm up here too. Does everyone have enough water? Are we good? Let's press on with the next question.
30-second answers.
30-second answers, we might do that. We've got such a lot of questions. I'm comfortable with the 1 minute. Are you comfortable with the 1 minute at this point still? We will move to some short, quick-fire stuff towards the end. The time is currently 8:29. Do we need to finish at 9?
By about 10 past.
We need to finish by 10 past 9, so we have 40 minutes of fun still to have. Are you having a good time? I'm happy with that. Thank you, panel, for your conviviality as well. It's a very warm evening up here. This is a question, thank you audience, from Julia McCord from Honiton, who wants me to ask the question. This is regarding fishing and protecting the marine areas. Close to the coast of Devon, a 1,000 square kilometre site in Lyme Bay is of international importance for whales and dolphins to breed and feed, yet it remains unprotected. We desperately need to secure the future of such areas if these charismatic creatures are to continue thriving around our shores. In this area and the rest of our waters, can your party commit to highly protected marine areas and sustainable fisheries which take into account the livelihoods of fishermen, as well as the protection of vulnerable marine species and fish stocks, banning damaging activities that for decades have decimated wildlife and habitats? Could I start with Neil on this question? Thank you.
Right. The pledge is to look at the detail that has been taken by the Secretary of State, the DEFRA Secretary of State. 36% of English inshore and offshore waters are currently protected within the marine protection area, and 41 marine conservation zones have been created. So we've been doing a lot of work on this. And as I said to you at the previous answer, we can also do much better when we come out of the common fishery policy, because a lot of the policies of the common fishery policy are bad for protecting our coastline and our fishing and our seabed. So I look forward to having a much better fishing policy that can be actually directed by the UK in our waters after we leave the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to John, please, for your response. Thank you.
The answer is yes, but if that's not too short, the Liberal Dem Party says sustainability is at the heart of the fisheries policy. We'll rebuild depleted fish stocks, decentralise, being the Liberal Democrats, and regionalise fisheries management systems. And there'll be a blue belt of marine protected area covering at least 50% of the UK waters by 2030. It's interesting, if you look at our fishing industry, we're seventh biggest in terms of the vessels' numbers, we're second largest in terms of capacity of fish, and fourth in the largest in terms of engine power. But the interesting thing is that 74% of our fish are caught by ships greater than 24 metres in length. So to put that another way, 4% of the catch is smaller boats, and these are the boats that we're talking about. And what is scandalous is that an investigation shows that 30% of the UK's fishing quotas are in the hands of just 5 families on the Sunday Times rich list. And Michael Gove has failed to take action upon that. And Caroline Lucas, to her credit, has said they need to take urgent action to redistribute fishing quotas.
Thank you very much. I am sorry to jump on the end of your answers. On to Colin, please. Thank you. I love the way they all look at me as if they say, who, is it me next? Is it me? No. Thank you.
Short answer, yes. We've committed, you can find it on page 80-something of the manifesto. I'm looking at it right now. By 2030, we've committed to making at least 30% of UK domestic waters into fully protected marine protected areas. We also want to work with the British Overseas Territories to increase the blue belt that John mentioned, because current extraction is way too high, and we want to increase the protection there from 32% to a 50% coverage of that. The green policy on everything has nature at its heart as part of the climate, so any of these climate-related issues, nature-related issues, people's well-being relation issues, the commitment that you want is all going to be there, including the NHS.
Thank you, Colin. Moving along to Margaret, if you please. Thank you.
Thank you. UKIP says, from leaving the EU, we leave the common fishing policy. Now, that means that we will actually take control of our full 200-mile exclusive economic zone. Now, at the moment, that there's a Dutch large trawler out there that's hoovering up and there are pulse fishing going on, which is destroying the seabed. With leaving the EU, we can rebuild using mainly what we say, priority given to the low-impact, small-scale fishers, which is far more very similar to the Lib Dem gentleman here. But we do agree, sorry? We agree with the Conservatives about how our fishing industry can be helped here, and the marine life, the whales in Lyme Bay in particular. And we've done this already, and we can still carry on doing it. Thank you.
Marvellous. And Liz, please, to conclude that question.
Hi, yeah, I'm freaking out because we've got so many pages about fisheries and marine life in our plan for nature we published today, so check that out. But basically, we're going to be creating national marine national parks. We're going to be redistributing the fishing quota away from large operators towards smaller operators. And we are going to be leading the way in the global by deploying our powerful maritime heritage to make sure that shipping is carbon neutral. We're going to be creating an English zone of the exclusive economic area. We're going to be establishing marine national parks. And we're going to be leading the global effort for a UN ocean treaty, creating a network of marine sanctuaries in 30% of the world's oceans, working with our allies in the Arctic Council to...
Thank you.
Etc.
Etc. That's great. Great end there. Okay.
You can only do that if you leave the EU. Yes. You can't redesign international waters and fishing rights unless you leave the
we
EU.
can redistribute the quota we have. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, audience. I'm sure you have a lot.
Why are we talking about whether we should be eating fish?
I'm vegan. I'm vegan. I would like to obviously.
I'm not vegan. I'm a hamburger guy.
I have a question.
The debate is on the wrong issues. It needs to be far more.
Please, audience, I am asking the questions. So many were passed through.
You're absolutely
really
right. We should eat more of our own fish. We don't, because we export it. We don't eat all the different varieties.
I'm asking the next question, please. I am asking the next question, please. Please, keep... Everybody, please, let's move through these questions, because I actually want to hear everybody's response to all of these questions. I really do. We're moving along to sustainable farming. Now, this is a question from Sally Chapman, who is in the room. Sally would like to ask the question herself. Yes, I'm very happy to ask it, no problem at all. There was a similar question actually also posed from David and Judith Simpson, so it's a kind of an amalgamation of the two. And it's about sustainable farming. And it says, methane is one of the most potent gases in the atmosphere. It is 86 times more powerful than carbon. And we are being told that we need to restrict our meat consumption dramatically and shift across to a plant-based diet. As farming in Devon is predominantly beef and dairy production, how are your respective parties proposing to reduce the impact of methane on the climate? For instance, would you be willing to remove subsidies from intense farming, which are creating artificially low prices for meat, and to use the subsidy to support the transition to more arable organic farming practices? Another amazing question. I will pass this down, and I would like Margaret to start with this one, please. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Farming in Devon is predominantly beef and dairy currently. Yes, we do know this, and it's lovely to see the cows in the fields and to have tasty food. But the subsidies that you're talking about come from the Common Agricultural Policy currently, and that is, if we leave the EU, we can decide what we want to do about that. Methane is actually a resource. Why could we not be gaming it like we do with, utilising it to warm farmhouses and what have you? There must be a way of doing this. You know what we also would look. Why do you think this is funny? You are weird.
Thank you.
Leaving the EU, we can design a tailor-made agricultural policy. That's what we'll do. Thank you.
Fine. If I could just ask the panel to please try and focus on the specifics in the question, that would be marvellous. Moving along to Liz, please.
Okay, so Labour is going to be auditing the carbon impact of all offshore production, including meat, and will be rejecting any trade deals that aren't compatible with our carbon goals. So that means that is the question. So the high...
Thank you.
The high in the methane? Well, okay, so... Okay.
Answer the question.
Thank you, audience. I appreciate the answer to the questions, and you all have the questions clearly in front of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to be supporting dairy farming in Devon. We're going to be providing direct farm subsidy to farmers. The pasture in Devon is a carbon sump and is going to be good for the environment. And we are going to be we're going to be... I'm not making it up. That's our farm subsidy plan. We're going to be investing in the biodiversity for the carbon sump in Devon.
Marvellous.
Through our farm subsidies.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Colin, please. Thank you very much, Liz.
Right. I take it you all know that methane forms 5% of UK pollution, and that's coming from the agriculture industry. So animal farming is really central to causing that. But to look at it as a singular thing would be the wrong way of doing it. I'm sorry, I've got to approach it as a part of a larger thing. Because tackling the methane issue relies on tackling the agricultural issue. If farmers are growing plants, we can use plants. If we don't have plants, we can't use them to make replacements for plastic bottles, cling wrap, shrink film, all those things, most of which can be made out of things like potato starch. You know, I bought a bottle of water the other day. It came from plant materials, all of it, 100%. It's fantastic. I'm reusing that bottle all the time. But farms take the central role in it. If they're not growing what we need to be able to use it, then we can't do what we want to do. So we need to incentivise the farmers and reward them for doing so.
Thank you, Neil.
Right, as I said earlier, there is 2.5 times as much carbon held in the soil with grassland than there is actually with trees. So therefore we very much need our grassland. The methane cycle is a 10-year cycle and is reabsorbed back into the soil. Not only do we create then great meat and milk, but we also then create storage for water. And so therefore our grassland is amazingly valuable. If you were to try and plough up all the arable, you would actually, because the questioner talked about arable, great arable is, but it does actually then release that carbon back into the atmosphere. So, you know, I mean, again, you know, and you would expect me to say this as a farmer, but let's absolutely be reasonable about this. We do actually need to have food and milk and meat, and if you want to be a vegan, vegetarian, fine. If you want to eat meat, do it. But look, the grassland is so valuable. And what are you going to do with the grassland if you don't have the cattle and the sheep? So please, let's be sensible on this one. Thank you very much.
Let's all be sensible, everybody. Marvellous. John, please, final response to that question.
Well, there is, as we're saying, I agree with you, a hierarchy of carbon footprints, starting with pulse grains and soya, through dairy and poultry to red meat, and red meat clearly has the highest carbon footprint. So we do need to lower our consumption of meat and dairy for food supply, climate, and for biodiversity. But we've got to be sensible. I think it's a balance, isn't it? That we need a reduction, but not a huge reduction, because we can't eat grass and pasture, but we can put crops on some of it, but not on all of it. But we can be biodiverse in the bits that we can't put the crops on. So, yeah, so I think we need to be sensible about that, try and reduce our consumption, but do it in a sensible way, understanding the way that the soil works and the way that the natural world works.
Thank you, audience. Thank you. A question here about transport and infrastructure, wind turbines specifically, from Aaron Moon and friends. Do you support the development of onshore wind turbines, in brackets, where conditions are appropriate, close brackets? And if I can start with Liz on that question, please. Thank you.
Yes, so we do support, our Green Transformation Fund is going to be partly putting onshore wind turbines into the UK. I think it's 20,000 onshore wind turbines that we're going to be putting up, and another 70,000, I think, offshore wind turbines in 37 wind farms. So yes, we do support that.
Thank you. On to Neil, strangely enough.
No, large-scale on-land wind farms are not part of our manifesto, because I have, in Devon here, every time in the constituency they want to go up, people really do not like them. And so therefore offshore wind is the way to go, solar is the way to go, and also, this is where I agree with my friend here on the right, the tidal lagoons as well in the Bristol Channel, where you've got the highest rise and fall in the tide in the world, which I have worked on. The Treasury doesn't like 30 years. Like saying being paid back in 30 years, you need to pay them back in 60 years, but they are right to do. So yes, I do not like onshore wind farms. Wind farms, they are farm.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, we support offshore and onshore wind farms, and we have a really a very dramatic requirement that we want 80% renewables by 2030, which is going to be a hard ask. But we think that that's achievable if we take in solar power and tidal power, tidal lagoon, and offshore and onshore wind. So we're up for it.
Thank you. Margaret, please.
UKIP will end subsidies for wind turbines and solar voltaic arrays. We will support renewable energy where it will deliver electricity or energy at competitive prices for the people.
How? If you're taking away the wind and the solar, how are you going to produce renewable energy?
That's what we're saying.
It's a very good point and a very good question.
That's what we need to do, is to find new ways of doing it that don't need subsidies, because the solar arrays and the wind turbines currently are subsidised so that we don't know the true cost.
Yeah, but how are you going to produce, sorry, this is an important question.
Yes.
How are you going to produce renewable energy if you are not going to invest in solar and wind? What else is there?
What we say with the solar panels, they should be on buildings, not on land. They should be on every building, is what we say, with regards to that.
Thank you. I have a feeling that we've had the minute on that one. And Colin, please. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Have I? Oh, you have. I do apologise. Thank you for keeping me in touch. It's very warm up here. I'm having a hot flash. Oh no, it's a power surge. It's all right. It's nothing to do with being 53.
You can heat the room.
I could heat the room, let me tell you. Solar energy, forget it, love. Just come here. This is a real quick one, and I'd actually like to pass the question.
I haven't had a chance to answer that one yet.
I'm sorry?
I haven't had my chance on
You
that.
haven't? No, I do apologise. Yes, yes.
That's what I was asking.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, wind turbines are appropriate in some cases, but they're old tech. They come with their own problems as well. So while we might see these big things on the horizon, some people like them, some people hate them. It's a bit of a Marmite issue. But they've done their job for a little while. What we've got now, I don't know if you're aware, is things like wind trees, which can actually populate cities and generate wind through our own environments. So as far as generating electricity through wind goes, we would do that. They're much more pretty, all right, they're all sort of artificial looking, but they're a lot more like a tree than a wind turbine is. We would embrace solar, wind and hydro, and just to put something from the UKIP manifesto, they want to rejuvenate the coal industry.
If we can keep the answers to the person that's doing the response, is everybody... You have indeed all responded, yes. So my apologies on that last one. This is a simple one. I'd like to ask the question and then pass the note down to the end, just so everybody can remember it nice and clearly. It should be a simple yes/no answer. Will your party put a levy on all flights to discourage this contribution to global emissions? How much and how soon? If you could start with Margaret at the end, please. Thank you. And the mic. Yeah. Starting at the end with Margaret. Thank you.
We haven't discussed this at all in our manifesto so far, so I couldn't tell you. But I know that personally, I only fly about once every 3 or 4 years, so I don't think I'm going to be bothered if there are levies for 1 or 2.
That's no way to run a country.
Marvellous.
What do you mean?
It was specifically asking for the party stance on that question. If you don't have it, then perhaps move it along. Yeah. Thank you very much. Colin.
Thank you. The first 1 or 2 flights a year would actually be free so that everyone can have a holiday. You know, you wouldn't actually get the tax. But when you remember that, I don't know if I said it today or yesterday, 70% of flights in this country are carried out by somewhere like 1 to 3% of the population. That's kind of wrong. They're doing it all the time. It's got to stop. So yes, we do have plans for a levy, beginning from after the second one for private citizens, but mainly on the corporates, because it's the corporates that have got to be targeted on all of this, because as much as you all care, the corporates are just making money where they can, and so we've got to properly tax them and properly incentivise and penalise them for not complying as well. So we don't have an exact figure. Unless it's something I haven't seen, we don't have an exact figure, but we do intend on putting the levy in.
Okay, thank you very much. Just moving it straight along the line. Thank you.
Okay, we're very similar to the Greens in this. We recognise, 70% of UK flights taken by 50% of people, so we're not going to tax people for their holidays, the first 1 or 2 flights. We are going to tax those who are more frequent than that, though I don't think the amount has actually been decided yet. But that we do need to limit that demand, and the calculation we're going to do is from 100% to 60% of the current levels in the very near future. But we need to urgently address it.
Thank you.
We already pay a fair bit of tax when we fly, and the tax needs to be levied on the fuel, not on the individual, because at the end of the day, it's the amount of fuel that these planes use. We need to cut back on that. You can get more efficient planes like you can also. And look, just be careful that, you know, you don't go completely everybody who flies for their living and flies for business. They actually create wealth, and it's not actually a bad thing to have wealth because you can then tax it and then you can actually spend it on public services. So let's not get sort of too carried away with it.
Thank you. We do keep hearing the answer to the question. So if the panel, I know it's a long evening, but if we can try and continue to keep focused on the specifics of the question. Thank you, Liz.
Yes, so Labour is going to be taxing frequent flyers, and we're also going to be outlawing fuel tanking where where planes go to destinations and buy fuel more cheaply and then fly full on a full tank. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Marvellous. Moving on to, I'm interspersing with some of the questions that were posed by people that came in this evening. So we have a youth question here to be asked by Ruby Tuckley. Where's Ruby? Oh, I'm sorry. Not your question. Oh, I see. Okay, but it's a youth question. Okay. If I would just run through this, it's how will you ensure that corporations in control of new energy infrastructure won't repeat the irresponsibility of today's energy companies? Can I start with John, please, for a response on that? And would you like and I'm guessing you'd like I only have one.
Well, we need to regulate them, don't we?
One of those questions, so I'll pass it down to you.
What was the question? How do we... Well, yeah, how will we ensure the corporations in control of you won't repeat the...
I think you need to just hold the mic just a wee bit further forward. Thank you.
Well, we need to regulate it. There is a place for regulation. We can't have a totally deregulated economy like neoliberals want. So if we want energy change to be... climate change to be controlled, then there has to be some sort of corporate governance to make sure that, that there isn't abuse of these things and that we end up with net carbon reduction. So I think regulation is the answer.
Thank you very much. Moving down to Liz, actually, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so... Sorry. Labour is going to be bringing the energy grid into public ownership, as well as rail, mail, water and parts of BT. And the reason for that is because we're going to be ensuring affordable, sustainable public services and a rapid transition to zero carbon.
Fine. Down to Margaret, please. Thank you. Down to Margaret, please. Neil, thank you. Margaret.
Yes, it is exactly as the Liberal Democrats can say, actually. Because, yeah, I actually have to agree. We would need regulations to ensure that the infrastructure won't cause more problems. That is very important.
All done? Colin, please. Thank you.
Local ownership of what is produced locally springs to mind. If it doesn't make its way into the corporate's hands, then they can't make the profit off it. Yeah, they can produce it, but they do it under our terms, and if they don't do it, then they end up paying the penalties for it. Essentially, to tackle the corporates, we've got to actually say, look, the corporates really are at the centre of this problem and hold them to account for it. Tax them properly on everything, because all of these problems are not limited to just environmental issues. You know, if we're not taxing them on aviation fuel, for example, which they don't have to pay tax on right now, then how can we generate money to put into other things? Nobody's naive enough to think that their income tax, when they pay it, goes to exactly the things that they want. So what we need to do is make sure that the spending plans are on what you want. And the only way to do that is to find it out from you.
Thank you very much. And finally.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually tried to cap energy prices in order to actually keep the price of energy down to the consumer. And so therefore it's very much to make sure that the Ofgem has those powers. And in the end, the corporates will have to keep that price down. And so therefore that is the way to deal with it. Because you can't forever push up the price of everything and tax everything, because that's what ends up adding costs to everything that we do. And we need to heat our homes, we need to drive our cars at the moment, we need to do all of these things. And so therefore, like I said, I actually think keep the prices down, cap the prices, and put pressure on the corporates through Ofgem. It's already there, it is a regulator, and we can strengthen it.
The question's about the environment, not about prices.
Thank you, audience. It was, but if you can hold on to the mic, please. Now a question for the individuals on the panel, and we can start with you, please, Neil. This is a question posed by David and Catherine Baxdale from Seaton. It's National Tree Week. What are you personally doing to help this initiative, starting with Neil?
Right. I am planting trees on the farm. I do it all the time.
You personally?
Yes, and personally. And I've got the spade, and I can show you where they are, and I can take them to you exactly where they've been planted. I also grow a lot of coppice and others. So, and also, thank you very much for Extinction Rebellion. I have the tree that you gave me up in London, gave all parliamentarians, and I'm going to plant it in Tiverton either tomorrow or Saturday, because with an oak tree, I've got a lovely oak tree, we just got to make sure we've got enough space to plant it so that it has time to grow, and that's what we're looking for, but we're getting there. So thank you very much for that tree. Thank you.
Thank you. On to Colin, please.
In practical terms, I'll be honest with you, there's not a huge amount I can do as I'm physically disabled. I'm not going to use that as an excuse, but it limits what I'm physically capable of doing. So instead, I'm trying to use what I know to help other people know those things and to address things by communication. You know, it's not just a physical type thing. However, I do drive an electric car. So.
Moving on to Liz, please. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm working with my wonderful agent, Adam, who is one of the biggest fruit tree growers in the southwest. And we are, he is, yes, we're putting trees, growing trees.
Thank you. Down to Margaret, please.
I'd love for you to see my garden. It's on a fairly new housing estate, well, 30-odd years old. It's only 30 years old, but my house is the only one that is full tree-lined all the way round. I get bats, I get birds, I feed them all, and we take care of the nature. And I haven't got room to put another tree in at the moment. I would love to. But yes, there we go. I'm into trees. I'm the tree warden for the village.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, John.
Well, it's a good question. I think we should all do our bit and put as many trees in on the land we have, but a lot of people can't put trees in. So I'll put trees where I can, but it still leaves 50. And the Liberal Democrats aim to put 60 million trees in a year. So
it was about you personally, though, this particular one.
No, but the point is it needs coordinating. And it
Indeed.
needs doing centrally with large-scale restoration of these things. So we can do our own bit, but it needs the bigger picture too.
Thank you. That's trees done then. Marvellous.
We've got a lot more to plant,
I did 1,000 last week. Well, actually, not me personally, but everybody can do more on the tree front. Sorry, as a CEO of a reforestation charity, everybody can do more. There is lots of public land, lots of gardens and public land, and all we actually need to do is ask. And invariably that land will turn up. So that's my final point on that. Alex Boone, I believe, are you in the room, Alex? Is Alex Boone in the room? Yes, just at the back there. Thank you, Alex. A great question on planning and housing. That will be, let's see, the mic. Could the mic go along to John, please, for the first response?
Okay, most parties made a commitment to build hundreds of thousands of new homes. How do you propose to ensure that planning decisions are appropriate to safeguard biodiversity and the climate and prevent excessive urban sprawl?
Well, we need there to be proper assessment of where the houses should go, and that would needs strong local councils to look at the places and have a long-term plan of the best places to, first of all, go to brownfield sites wherever possible to stop the urban sprawl. We need accessible green spaces protecting as well, and that's one of our policies. So we need to give a local green space designation the force of law. So we need to empower councils to make the correct decisions. And also to build the houses that are of appropriate quality. So we need to be carbon neutral straight away and passive house standards by 2025. So we need to look at where they're put to get to also recreate biodiversity as well. So we need to keep all of these things in mind when we plan these houses, and not just let the developers go where they want to put their developments. And they should be required to put in infrastructure in the places, for instance, transport as well.
Thank you very much. I really want to squeeze as many as I can into this end. Neil, please.
Right, very much build on brownfield sites when we can. Also, as we build, make sure that we deal with the runoff not only from the roofs but from the drives. We make sure we can have a little bit of grass if we can to absorb a lot of the water. There's a way we can actually put water tanks under the houses. All of these things, because also there are areas where if you are going to build where there may be problems with rivers, others, then you actually have to hold that water, create water parks and the like. So you see, we have got to make sure that we produce these homes, and so use the brownfield sites first and then look at the way we build in the future. And again, it is down a lot to the local authorities, but don't forget, all governments give local authorities targets to meet, then those local authorities have to find them. And so therefore, like I said, we all have to work together on this, but I do actually believe we need housing.
Okay, thank you very much. Down to Margaret, please.
UKIP states that they will build 1 million homes on brownfield sites. We will infill within certain areas where they're to stop ribbon development so that we actually have the houses in a community. It forms a community rather than a long ribbon of development. We also want the developments on the, where we want to build these million homes, we want them to be modular. And the modular is actually lower in energy use and will help the climate in that way.
All done, thank you. Colin, please. I'm keeping them guessing, aren't I? Yeah. It's a tough job here, I can tell you. Thank you.
Okay, well, regulation is all well and good, but if the regulation sucks, then so does everything else. The regulation has to be right from the first instance, and that's coming from central government. That doesn't mean that they have to have total control over everything. Using the Norwich project as an example of a passive house development, where that actually won this year's, I think it was this year's, perhaps last year's, Architecture Award. It was an incredible project. It was actually the first social housing project to win that award, making affordable houses which were completely future-proof and had electricity bills that, from a heating perspective, that were 90% lower than they would otherwise have been. Local councils know their local area, so it makes sense that they set their targets for housing, etc. In order to prevent the developers from raking in all the profits like they have done, then we need to tax the developers. Currently, the public actually foot the bill for planning submissions by developers, and that costs the public.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologise.
Per year.
Yes, the stop sign is up. I do apologise. Liz, final. Thank you. And then we're going to have some fun.
The Labour Council in Norwich, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, Labour will put the voices of local people at the heart of the planning process. We will ensure that we meet our international obligations under the Aarhus Convention to ensure participation in environmental decision-making, and we'll facilitate planning inquiries for major projects, undertake public consultation on the planning system reforms. We're going to be making sure that the 150,000 new, genuinely affordable and social homes we build a year are going to be, local people are going to have first dibs on those homes, so that people working in local communities are going to be able to live close to where they work. And we're also going to be, so we'll be consulting on the need for different criteria against which proposals are environmentally assessed, including things like, does it disturb protect habitats? Does it contribute to biodiversity? What are the predictable effects on climate change? And a lot of other important...
Marvellous. Right, you'll be delighted to know that you are in the last few questions, and we are going to give one question to each candidate to answer. I've kind of put them in an interesting order, and you've got 30 seconds, not a minute. Starting with you, Liz. If you could read the question out and then just follow straight out. Thank you.
How do you intend to protect and educate your constituents faced with the level of crisis that scientists are predicting? So a couple of things, like I already mentioned, the National Education Service, and Labour's going to have environment and climate change at the heart of that. And I personally am going to visit all kinds of businesses, community groups, and knocking on doors. And this is one of the things that I do speak to people about week in, week out. So yes.
Marvellous. Pass this one to Neil for me, please. And I only am going to literally give them to them immediately and then get them to read it out, and they're not going to have time to think about these. They shouldn't.
Right, we need to stop burning fossil fuels, full stop. New electric cars are very expensive. The ranges available and planned for 2020 seem to be biased towards the luxury end of the market. There are a few second-hand cars, and even those are unknown quantities given reliability and lifespan. Relying on natural attrition's rates will not bring usage of fossil fuels in cars down quick enough. How do you intend to remove the existing stock of cars, vans, HGVs in a useful timescale?
Your 30 seconds starts now.
I think you did ask me to read out the question, and you did give me a very long question.
It's a whopper, I realise it.
Can you give me 30 seconds to answer?
Please,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay, I actually am optimistic about electric cars because all the main, one of the things I read is Auto Trader, and even Volkswagen and all the major manufacturers across the world are actually producing electric cars like mad because they know they've got to get away from diesel and petrol, and so the price of cars are coming down. And when we've got our electric cars, we'll plug them in at night, the wind turbines will go around, and we'll have all that power in our batteries, and we better use it the next day. But like I said, there is actually a really positive position on
Marvellous.
electric cars.
Thank you very much. Moving along, please, to John. Could you pass this? Thank you kindly. Thank you, audience. We're nearly there. Last few. Come on, we can do it. We can hang in there.
Oh, would your party contribute to global compensation for loggers, farmers in Brazil to abandon the destruction of rainforest?
Yeah.
Well, it's a problem, isn't it? A problem with the administration in Brazil being a populist government, similar to the one we might get here soon. I like that.
30 seconds and ticking. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think that we need, as an international body, to put pressure on Brazil to stop this deforestation. It's their problem, and I think if it needs subsidy from the international community, then we should give it. We've got to take these things seriously.
Thank you, Marvellous. If you can move that one along to Colin for me, please.
Cheers. Or we could just make them national or global parks.
Thank you. Read that out.
Aaron Moon and friends have asked, given that 80% of existing homes in the UK will still be occupied in 2050, how would you get these homes to zero carbon? This is of particular importance to the rural properties of Devon, which often use oil tanks and can be listed properties with single glazed windows. Very much a problem around here, what with the mountainous areas and igneous rock, etc. We would actually financially incentivise homeowners, etc., but we will also, as a main thing, be throwing in billions to re-kitting all of the houses, 100,000 per year, if I've got that right, annually, every single year. If the legislation doesn't allow it,
I think we are
then
at 30.
we have to change
yes.
the legislation.
Okay, fair enough. The final question, and it sadly has to be, I believe, the final question at 12 past. So thank you very much. Margaret, if you could read the final question out for me, please. Thank you. And I do apologise, there are 4 I haven't managed to do, but I've done my best. Thank you. Can you read the question out?
The climate crisis is the environmental equivalent of World War III. But there seems to be a lack of urgency among those who govern us. What will you do to generate the responses needed by government, business, academia and individuals to win this war before it is too late? I don't think it's totally human activity that causes climate change.
The question, please. The question, please.
And
please, thank you.
So what would we do to generate the response needed to win the war is we legislate. We actually would have to have new acts of parliament, and this needs to be worldwide. It isn't just us.
I think with the stop hand up for the final time, I have to say that I cannot, I'd love to, but I'd like to get the last four in. I can't. We have to stop. We have to clear the room. Please, would you give an enormous round of applause to the grilled panel of Liz Cole, Neil Parish, John Timpley, Colin Reid and Margaret Dennis. I would also just like to thank you very much for listening to me doing the best that I could do at my school desk. My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this all week. Thanks to all of the organisers, the wonderful helpers here with the Times. One final thing, there is a donations pot somewhere. Oh, at the front, if you could chuck a copper or two in there to help with the hiring of the hall. Huge thanks to Helena for organising tonight.